Hey guys, Zach Draskick here. Today in this video, we're going to be talking about one of my favorite baits of all time, and that is the jerkbait. The jerkbait is the king of reaction baits. It is one of my favorite lures, and it should be one of yours too. Now, this is an incredibly effective bait, but it is not one that I would throw into the hands of a beginner angler. This is a lure where a very small change can make a very big difference in the success that you're having with it. All right, to begin with, let's talk about when you want to throw a jerkbait. Now, you can throw a jerkbait year round. I've been catching fish from back when sometimes I had to break some ice off the cover of the boat to launch till now. But typically, this is a bait that excels most from the end of the summer, early fall period to the pre-spawn period. But again, this is a lure that you never have to put away. But in the colder months, I will always have a jerkbait tied on. This is a bait that you typically want a little bit of visibility with. This is a reaction bait, and it's a very visual bait. This has got a lot of good darting action when you're twitching it in, and you need a little bit of water clarity. Now, it doesn't have to be crystal clear. You don't need 20 foot of visibility, but having a foot or two really will help out your bite. The next ingredient you're going to look for is wind. I have caught so many fish on a jerkbait when there is wind. You can go to a windblown point or down some windblown riprap, a flat, and you can just annihilate some fish with a jerkbait. So windy days, definitely pick up your jerkbait. Next thing you want to look for is a little bit of cloud cover. If you have some cloud cover, that can make up for a little bit a lack of wind sometimes. But if you have overcast conditions, windy conditions, and a cooler water time period, I guarantee there will be a jerkbait bite going on somewhere in your lake. Now, when it comes to jerkbaits, they're a very visual bait, and you want that water clarity, but another thing you want to make sure is you're keeping the bait above the fish. You know, a jerkbait kind of looks like a crankbait, but this isn't something you want digging into the bottom, into the rocks. You want to keep this bait above the fish. It's darting, it's moving around. It's kind of like a underwater, topwater lure almost. So you want that bait above the fish to get the best bites on there. And just tweak your jerkbait choice, whether you're going with a regular diver or some of the deeper divers, on how deep the fish are or how deep you are fishing. But I would rather err on a shallower diving bait than risk getting down below the fish. Now, when it comes to jerkbaits, my favorite jerkbait, like the one I have, is the one I have in my hand here. It's no secret if you followed me from some of my early videos, or if you are one of my Facebook followers. I love this little 110 +1 junior. I love the regular junior model as well. I'm not a big tournament angler, so I want to catch every fish possible. So if you're like me and just love catching numbers of fish, you can just get the 110 junior and the 110 +1 junior and call it a day. These are fantastic little jerk baits. Although these do catch big fish as well, I've caught some big 4 to 6 pound bass on these little baits. They don't weed out the small fish. You're gonna catch a lot of smaller fish. You can catch some big crappie and things on these. So if you want to just catch tournament caliber bass, I would say to just pick up the regular 110 lineup or something in that size to make sure that you're getting more of the quality fish that you're looking for. That being said, I would try to match the size of the bait. If you're seeing a lot of little minnows and little baits, that's when I would pick up one of these smaller ones. And if they are chasing bigger gizzard shad, definitely go to the pick up the full size one, or even I like this the 110 Max, or even the Canada is another bait that I like to throw when they're chasing bigger baits like gizzard shad or even skipjack. Now another thing that people get wrong and really can be overwhelming sometimes is the colors on the jerkbait. Uh, most lures, color choice doesn't really matter all that much. I don't feel anyway. I don't get wrapped up in colors with my baits typically. Jerk baits are definitely an exception. I've seen where just a small color change can make a huge difference in the amount of success you're having with a jerk bait. If I'm going to the lake and I think a jerkbait bite's going on, if we have cloud cover, I'm typically going to start with this matte shad. If we have sun, I'm typically going to start with something like this ITO clear laker, a little bit translucent with a little bit of flash in there to start with, and see how they're reacting to my bait. If they're committing to it, I'll stick with it. But if I'm getting a lot of followers, if I'm getting a lot just swiping at it, or if I'm noticing I'm getting a lot of them foul hooked, that's when I'll go and start playing with my colors a little bit. Now, sometimes if the water is like a little bit stained, if you have a little bit of sun, that's when I would break out something with a little bit more flash. You may not need to go full chrome, but something more chromy, or something like a Tennessee shad that's got that flash and just a little bit of chartreuse on it. If they're not committing, if it's overcast, you may want to try something like this elegy bone here. This is the color that I've really been smashing them on here on Gunnersville lately. With if you want to get bit on a jerkbait right now, just start with this elegy bone. Forget what I said about the matte shad and the clear laker. This thing has been on fire lately. But it's also one of my favorite colors when I'm targeting the spotted bass and smallmouth upriver. Now, something about smallmouth and spotted bass, they just get triggered with that chartreuse. So if I'm in a smallmouth or spotted bass fishery, that's another time I just go ahead and start with an elegy bone and maybe work backwards if they're not reacting to it the way that I want to. As far as colors go, that's basically how I play with it. If we have sun and they're not committing, I may go to something with some flash. If that doesn't work, I'm going to try something more transparent, translucent. Sometimes with if you get something more translucent that's clear, doesn't give as much of a profile for those fish to see, sometimes that can be the difference for them committing to a jerkbait as well. And another thing you might want to consider when you're expanding your jerkbait lineup is Megabass recently released the Silent, the Vision 110 Silent, and that's something. If you have really clear water, if you're losing that wind, or if the fish are really pressured, this 110 regular 110 Silent has caught me a lot of fish this year when I couldn't get bit on even my junior size bait. So playing around, if you're not having the fish commit, and getting throwing a silent jerk bait at them is something that can mop up or get you bit in some pressured waters where your regular jerk baits aren't working. Now, if I've tried a few different colors and that doesn't seem to help, I'm still getting just followers or getting a lot foul hooked, that's when I'll play with my speed a little bit. Because sometimes the speed, or they'll refer to it as cadence. Sometimes you'll hear some pros say sometimes how fast you're moving the jerkbait can make or break you. Man, I've had some bites where I have to work that thing just as fast as I can, like my forearm and wrists start cramping up because they just want that thing worked hard and fast. And then there's other times where they want a longer pause. You'll have to stop the bait a lot more. So definitely play with that if you've tried a couple different colors and you're still not getting the commitment that you want on your jerkbait. Another thing that can impact your jerkbait is your line choice. Now, A lot of people and a lot of pros will say, fluorocarbon and that's it. I like using braid to leader a lot in the warmer months, but at some point, I highly recommend having fluorocarbon, at least a leader. What that'll do is help your jerkbait get down to depth. And if you have a floating line, it's gonna mess up the action of your bait and make it do some funky things on the paws. So definitely have fluorocarbon at some point, either straight fluoro or braid to a fluorocarbon leader. I'm typically running lighter line, anywhere from like 6 or 8 pound tests when I'm using like the juniors or the Nana hands, up to 10 or 12 pound test when I'm using the full size Vision 110s or larger. I typically won't go above 12-pound test because that heavier line, as it gets thicker, will start impacting the jerkbait action. It'll deaden it a little bit, and I want that bait to be responsive to me. I normally in the winter months is when I'll always use just straight fluorocarbon, because what that fluorocarbon will do is it'll deaden the action a little bit of your bait and make it easier to make those soft twitches that they like a lot in the wintertime. But in like the spring, summer, and like the fall we're in right now, a lot of times I'll throw braid to leader, because what that'll do is it'll make your bait so much more responsive. When you hit it, it's jerking, and as soon as you give it slack back, it stops, and you can get a lot better darting out of it if you throw braid to leader. It will make your bait come up a little bit more, but this time of the year on Gunnersville, at least, there's a lot of grass still, so keeping your bait up a little bit isn't a bad thing right now. So that's why I tend to throw braid to leader. Those two reasons there. You can also get a little bit further casting distance with that braid to leader and help you cover water a little bit better. And right now in the fall, that's the name of the game. All right, we talked about the line impacting the action of your bait, but when you're actually working your bait, one of the most important things to do, and something that I messed up with when I first started working a jerkbait, is you got to give this bait slack back. Every time you twitch it, you have to give it slack back, because if you just pull it, if you don't point your rod tip back at the bait, if you don't throw slack back into it, all it's going to do is just pull your bait straight forward. You're just basically treating it like a crankbait. Then you're not getting that kind of walking, darting, erratic motion that really triggers a lot of strikes in these fish. So make sure that you are giving slack back to it, and make sure you're not hitting it too hard. That's another thing that I was doing when I first started jerkbait fishing. I was just hitting that thing about as hard as I could. I heard people call it a rip bait, so I was just ripping that thing, and I was wondering why I wasn't catching many fish. It was a wonder I was catching any fish as hard as I was hitting it. So make sure you're giving it, you're not hitting your bait too hard, and you're giving it slack back. I recommend try to find, if you can find a pool, that's great, but if not, just pitch it beside the boat. I'll always, when I first start fishing a jerkbait, I'll give it a couple twitches beside the boat to see how hard I need to hit it to make it have some action, and see how hard I can hit it before it just blows out, just comes straight to me. Because sometimes they want that aggressive hit, and sometimes they want the soft twitches. So you have to know what your bait is doing on the other end of the line, and what rod you have it on, and your line choice for that day. There's a lot of different factors can go into what that bait's going to be doing. So make sure you know what your bait's doing. Give it a pitch beside the boat and work it a couple times just so you get the feel of it, especially when you put it on a new rod. And for most of my jerk baits here, you can see, like even from this little one to this full size one here, I took off the split rings, and I did that because I'm 99% of the time fishing a jerk bait on a clip, and that's another, along with my braid to leader, running a clip is another thing that I do that a lot of people are not necessarily fans of, and I like running a clip because with a jerk bait, having just the right color can make such a big impact on your bite choice. I'm changing my jerk baits a lot, you know, unless uh, I hit it on the head on my first color choice of the day, I'm gonna be having to go back and forth on my jerkbait colors. So I want to be able to do that quickly. I don't want to have to waste a lot of time cutting and retying and wasting all my leader and all my main line just trying to figure out the bite for the day. So I'll even sometimes have my jerkbait box just on the deck, and I'll be just constantly playing with the colors and the depth that they're going until I figure it out. So I want something I can undo and put back on quickly. So that's why I run a clip. Now it will go and might make your bait sink a little bit, but that's not necessarily a bad thing, you know, unless you're needing it to be perfectly suspended. A clip is usually not going to mess you up. I think it's going to put more fish in the boat than it is going to shy them away. Another thing people mess up on with jerk baits is the hooks. Now, with a jerk bait, I am going to always want to run round bend hooks. Because this is a reaction bait, you're going to get a lot of fish hitting that are striking, like it says, out of reaction and not necessarily because they're hungry and want to eat this thing. So when you're making a fish hit, you're going to have a lot of half-hearted hits, a lot of swiping hits. You're going to get some foul hooks. So you want a round bend hook to increase your hookup percentage. Now, I already showed you this stunner here. I love the Berkley stunner. I've caught a lot of fish on it, but they come with EWGs. So anytime I have a bait that comes with EWGs, I change them to round bend hooks. Now I run a lot of Ryugis. They have that slick coating. Any kind of slick coated round bend hook would be good to add on. Just make sure you're matching the size as much as you can with these hooks. If you put too heavy of a gauge hook or too much bigger of a hook, you're going to affect the action and you can really sink your bait down. And while we're talking about hooks, these jerk baits, most of them come with very light wire hooks, and people complain about straightening their hooks out on a big fish. When you get your jerk bait rod set up, you need to make sure that you're setting your drag for the diameter of the hook and not necessarily the diameter of your line. It's very easy to straighten out these hooks if you're putting a lot of pressure on those fish. So back off on your drag a little bit. If you hook up on a big one, back off a little bit more in the fight, and that'll lead to a little less heartbreak when they surge next to the boat. And periodically check on your hooks throughout the day. Make sure that when you boat flip the last one, you didn't tweak out the hook a little bit, and that'll put more fish in your boat. And my favorite jerk baits, I like these 110 juniors so much because it's a small jerk bait, so I can catch a lot of fish on them, and it's 3 hook. Now there's a lot of small jerk baits out there, but a lot of them only come with 2 hooks, so that's why this is my favorite by far. And when you're running with 3 hook baits and you're catching a lot of fish, some of them being small, you run the risk of getting a hook in the hand. So that's why I highly recommend getting some of these long-handled pliers. It'll really save your trip and keep you from getting hooked in the hand, especially those small fish. You can get in there real easy with these long-handled pliers. Keep your hands as far back away from the danger zone as possible. Make sure you're not grabbing the line when there's still tension in your rod, because if you grab the line and there's tension in your rod from the weight of the fish, if that fish throws the hook, that bait's coming up and is going to get a hook in the hand. So that's another thing that might make your jerk bait fishing experience a little bit better as well. All right, I hope you've enjoyed my primer on jerkbait fishing and feel more confident in going out and throwing one of these guys. I've caught hundreds of fish on a jerkbait just in the past few weeks alone. So get out there, throw a jerkbait, especially if you have some wind, and I guarantee you will load the boat. All right, now I'm going to throw a little bit of a ringer in here. I've noticed sometimes if I'm on a good jerkbait bite and all of a sudden maybe the wind disappears or the bite dies, I can pick up a spy bait and mop up. A spy bait mops up really well from a jerkbait. So I keep my spy baits in my jerkbait box for that reason, so I can just go and quickly change over to a spy bait if my bite changes or I need to try to mop up a couple more fish in the area. Spy bait is deadly, and you know, it's very similar to that jerkbait where you can catch a lot of fish on these things in a hurry given the right conditions. But this is a good little mop up bait if you need to catch a couple behind someone with a jerkbait.